So Atiku says he wants to bring back fuel subsidy. Bring back fuel subsidy. Does Atiku know what he's talking about at all? Or he just wants to win an election? People are already asking, what is Atiku smoking? Is this another of his poor judgment escapades? Or does he know what he's talking about? Already, Tinubu has taken him to the cleaners. Tinubu is already tearing him to pieces, you know. When Adeleke went to submit the people's victory to Tinubu in Aso Rock, aftermath of the Osun election, Tinubu used that opportunity to attack Atiku. You know. And he said, oh, one of my opponents. Thank God he used opponent, because usually he would use my enemy. One of my opponents. Now we're not even sure because he didn't mention names. It is not only Atiku that is saying they will bring back fuel subsidy. It's not only Atiku. Sowore has been saying they will bring back fuel subsidy for a long time. So now we don't even know who Tinubu is referring to when he says one of my opponents. But he said something. Atiku has no knowledge of how the economy works, according to Tinubu. But is it that Atiku does not know how the economy works? Or that Atiku does not know how fuel subsidy worked? It could be one of the two. Because bringing back fuel subsidy is actually bringing back corruption. If you go by what somebody like Buhari said about fuel subsidy. In fact, if there's anybody who understood how fuel subsidy worked, it was Buhari. Most other persons don't. Forget all these so-called Western-trained, IMF and World Bank-trained economists that come on TV to be telling you the nonsense they've been taught to say. Nonsense. Many of the so-called economists that you see on TV, so-called oil and gas experts, they are IMF trained though. They are IMF puppets. And they are just coming on screen to do their master's bidding. It go hard for you to see any of them. We go, maybe for the likes of them, Paul Alaje, them Zakar, many others now. Their brain is 90% Akamu, 10% brain. Forget them. They don't know about the fuel subsidy, really. Sometimes they are confusing the PDP subsidy with APC subsidy. Or they are just talking about what they don't understand. So, Tinubu is accusing Atiku, or maybe Sowore. But Atiku, because it is Atiku that just recently said he's going to bring back fuel subsidy. So, it is safe to assume that Tinubu was referring to Atiku. That Atiku has no knowledge of how the economy works. And he said it like he was surprised that Atiku says he will bring back fuel subsidy. Of course, saying that he will bring back subsidy, I think that statement is where the problem is. Because really, I think what he meant to say was to bring down the price of petrol. Because that price of petrol wey Tinubu jack go up 1,200, 1,300 is what is making life unbearable for many Nigerians. Abi, is it not? It may not be on its own, but even on its own, it contributed a lot to the sufferings that Nigerians are suffering. But then, there are also other contributing factors, like the devaluation of the naira, hike in electricity tariff. All those are factors. But what exactly is that subsidy? Because if you know what subsidy is, then you will understand that you don't need to bring back fuel subsidy to reduce the price of petrol in Nigeria. This is where Peter Obi differs from them all. Because very quickly now, APC, Tinubu boys, data boys, they will start telling you, hey, should be all three of them, the leading candidates, they said they were going to remove fuel subsidy in 2023. What has changed? And I'm not guessing, because the publicity secretary of APC has already started saying it. That Peter Obi, Atiku said they were going to remove fuel subsidy in 2023. Why is Atiku coming out now to say he's going to bring back fuel subsidy? If it's going to bring back fuel subsidy, let him show details. Let him show the plan. How is he going to achieve it? Look, many of the persons, the politicians, you think now they overrate them. Many of the politicians, many of the so-called experts, whether oil and gas, whether economists, now they overrate them. Maybe because you hear that they went to Harvard or they went to one very big name, Oxford. Now they overrate them. They don't understand this fuel subsidy. It's either that or they are deliberately doing the bidding of their paymasters to confuse you by telling you lies. It's one of those two, ignorance or mischief, one of the two. Because the person who really understood fuel subsidy, do you know who he is? Buhari. Before Buhari came, Buhari said, who is subsidizing who? Subsidy is a scam. He knew it. And when he came, maybe you have forgotten, when Buhari came in 2015, the whole of 2016, there was nothing paid for fuel subsidy. Nothing paid for fuel subsidy. And that 2016, nothing borrowed. Or very minimal borrowed. And we still bought fuel cheap. At 185 naira. It was 145, then it became 185. At 145 naira. The whole of 2016. Very minimal money borrowed, zero subsidy paid. How many of you remember? That was the time when Ibe Kachiku, is it Ibe Kachiku? Yeah, Ibe Kachiku, the guy from Chevron, was the Minister of State for Petroleum. Of course, Buhari made himself the substantive Minister of Petroleum. No subsidy. But after a while, because there was a big difference, a big gap between NNPC and Minister of State for Petroleum, NNPC was not answering or was not answerable to the Minister of State for Petroleum. It was not. The NNPC Group CEO, Mele Kyari, was jumping over the head of the Minister of State to communicate directly with the Minister of Petroleum, who happens to be the President, Buhari, at the time. And guess what? The whole of 2016, no fuel subsidy. It was at the beginning of 2017 that we started hearing, because the NNPC kept their books like a black box. Only the NNPC knew exactly what was going on in there. Later, we got to find out or hear from the same Mele Kyari himself that NNPC was not paying anybody for a subsidy. But in that 2017, NNPC, their book started reading on their recovery. Mele Kyari trickishly, corruptly reintroduced fuel subsidy, the one that Buhari removed. And Buhari kept quiet, maybe because of that poisoning. You know, when Buhari came, he said, I belong to everybody and I belong to nobody. He was trying to show power. And before you know, we heard that the air condition was poisoned and then he was sick, you know, 3 months outside and all that. After Buhari came back, Buhari was a different person. So that was when they started bringing in all those under recovery. They started sneaking in fuel subsidy. So if there's anybody who knew about fuel subsidy, it was Buhari and Ibe Kachiku. Because Ibe Kachiku kept saying there is no subsidy. But he could not access the books of the NNPC. And when he insisted, what did Mele Kyari do? Mele Kyari came out boldly, right in our eyes, to say he does not answer to the Minister of State, he answers to the President. And now the President is compromised because since he came back from the UK after that 3 months of treatment to save his life from the alleged poisoning in the Aso Rock, he was never the same again. He was now, anything we want to do. He now started condoning the corruption that was in the NNPC. And that was how Mele Kyari got his way and started increasing subsidy. In the real sense of it, Buhari was right. There was no fuel subsidy paid. Fuel subsidy is a scam. Ibe Kachuku was right. There was no such thing as fuel subsidy. But Mele Kyari, in partnership with his falling collabs, successfully brought in the idea of fuel subsidy in a manner that none of us understood. Do you guys remember that we kept arguing? Not we now, we knew better. The so-called oil and gas experts, the so-called expert economists, they kept saying that no, we are borrowing to pay for subsidy. In fact, we are borrowing to pay the interest on the loan we took to pay for fuel subsidy, meaning that we were paying fuel subsidy. Did you guys hear that? Fuel subsidy cannot be sustained. It's not allowing us to see money to spend. Fuel subsidy cannot be sustained. We are spending all our money paying for fuel subsidy. That was the argument in support of why subsidy must go. But guess what? Why they are making those arguments as oil and gas experts, as economic experts, Western trained, guess all of them are always Western trained. Their brain has been replaced 90% Akamu, 10% true brain. So functioning capacity in terms of patriotism is reduced to 10%. So if I were you as a serious Nigerian, take everything they tell you with a pinch of salt. Because while they were arguing that we were borrowing to pay for fuel subsidy, we were borrowing to pay interest on the loan that we took to pay for fuel subsidy. In 2023, immediately after the election, Mele Kyari first of all came out himself to say that the NNPC didn't pay fuel subsidy to anybody. In fact, Mele Kyari clarified it that the federal government did not pay any fuel subsidy money to NNPC. Then, as if that was not enough, what happened next? The chief financial officer, the group CFO, came out to also say that the NNPC did not pay anybody any money. So, if the NNPC did not pay anybody any fuel subsidy, whether oil marketers or whoever, and the federal government did not pay any money to NNPC, who exactly did we pay fuel subsidy to? This is a scam that they don't want you to know about. But they just want to tell you, oh, fuel subsidy is not sustainable. How did Mele Kyari and the group CFO of the NNPC describe subsidy? They called it net off. Because they had the DSDP arrangement in place. DSDP, direct sale, direct purchase. Many people confuse the DSDP which is an APC subsidy regime, with OPA, which is PDP fuel subsidy regime. In the OPA, in the early part of the OPA, that was when oil marketers would import and then they would submit a bill to be paid. So some people were paid, and in fact many of those oil marketers were prosecuted. But even towards the later part of the PDP oil subsidy, when OPA came in under the Ziani, that changed to oil swap. So they were now swapping. The payment was no longer there. That was where all the later stuff that became perfected in the DSDP was perfected, and the DSDP became a perfect trade by barter. Perfect trade by barter. No single money changes hand. They hold meeting every 90 days or so, or 30 days, no, 45 days, to reconcile. Okay, how many barrels of crude oil we don't give you? How many liters of petrol you supposed give us? Okay. Everything cashless, not a single dime paid. But they come out to tell us, we could not pay. We are borrowing to pay for a subsidy. And I don't know, somehow Nigerians believe them. I don't know. Till date, many Nigerians don't know what fuel subsidy is. And then they will now come out and say, because we are doing the DSDP, we could not, we don't have oil to sell anymore. Our revenue is gone. Ignorance, ignorance. What is ignorance? Ignorance is worse than poison. Instead for ignorance to kill a man, poison should just kill the man. Ignorance. How many barrels of crude oil do you need to get the liters of petrol or refined petrol product that Nigeria needs on a daily basis? How many? 600,000 is even too much. Dangote refinery is 650,000 barrels of crude oil per day. Abi? Guess what? That maximum, Dangote refinery operating at maximum capacity, 100%, produces more fuel than Nigeria needs, which means that you don't need up to 650,000 barrels of crude oil to refine the petrol that the whole of Nigeria needs on a daily basis. In fact, calculation puts it at between 400,000 barrels and 450,000 barrels. How many barrels of crude oil does Nigeria extract or produce every day? Right now it's about 1.6, 1.7, 1.8. They're even planning on it getting up to 2 million barrels per day. If you remove 450,000, remove 500,000, the oil don't finish. See how they lie to you. Another lie they lie is that, they have used Nigeria's oil to borrow money in the future. Future oil, they have used it as collateral to borrow money. All those things are half truths, half lies. How many barrels of crude oil does Nigeria or has Nigeria used? And when I say Nigeria, I mean both Buhari and even including Tinubu himself. Have they used to borrow money? Because Project Gazelle, $3 billion to shore up the foreign exchange, was done under Tinubu in 2023-2024. But they want to lie and deceive you and say everything is under Buhari. Both of them borrowed and used future crude oil production as collateral. What is the total from Project Gazelle to Project Eagle to Project Menene? All of them. 272,000 barrels per day. So if you add a 400 plus a 272, it's still less, about 600 and something thousand. A country where corruption has not eaten into their oil and gas will still be able to have crude oil revenue outside of the one it uses to service its own citizen. So if Nigeria takes that 450,000 barrels of crude oil and decides to refine it in an oil swap arrangement, which can be done with Dangote right now, that DSDP arrangement, it can be done with Dangote in such a way that Dangote gives us refined petrol products, takes the crude oil without paying for it, but will keep the byproducts, all the fertilizer, the ammonia and all that. It will keep it as its profit. It can still be done with 450,000 barrels of crude oil. In fact, increase it to 650. And with that arrangement, fuel can be sold to Nigeria at 300,000 naira. Whatever other profit you need, you get from the excess crude oil production. You get it from it. And then you come and tell me, no, that's not how it works. There is a production sharing contract. There is a JV joint venture. Blah, 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 blah. Yes, there is. Oh, there is cash call. There is this. The $3 billion US dollars, what did you use it for? In the so-called JV. All the money you are using, the Project Eagle, what did you use the money for? Corruption everywhere. And rather than them coming to tell you, and I'm talking about Tinubu and the APC, coming to tell you the truth that the problem with our oil and gas is actually corruption. Now corruption, they are eating the money does not get out of the NNPC safe. Not to talk of getting to the federal government most times, or getting to the people. Corruption. So when an Atiku comes out to say, oh, I will remove fuel subsidy, or I will bring it back now, because 2023 was, I will remove fuel subsidy. In fact, 2023, Atiku said, I will sell the refineries. But as usual, flip-flop Atiku, when it suits him, he flip-flops. 2023, zoning is not good. 2019, zoning is the way. 2011, zoning is the way. 2015, zoning is the way. So when he favors him, there's zoning. When he does not favor him, there's no zoning. So when he thought he would favor him, fuel subsidy must go. Now that he thinks it will not favor him, no, I will bring back fuel subsidy. But does he know what he's talking about? That is the cocoa of the matter. So it's not about criticizing him, because between him and Tinubu, two of them know that the problem really is not the subsidy. The subsidy is not there anywhere. Tinubu just increased the price of petrol to favor Dangote refineries and their foreign partner. Now, waiting them do be that. Because there was no subsidy being paid anywhere. And Tinubu knows it. The latest victim of Tinubu's corruptive power, the Minister of Finance, came and tried to explain these things away. But they are clear. This is actually very simple if you know how to look. And we'll give our time to make sure that we educate Nigerians as much as we can. Because they are not interested. So they don't even want to watch, wait to consign them. They don't know that the oil money can actually make their lives a lot better. They don't know. They just think fuel subsidy is not concern me. They see fuel subsidy as something that happens in Aso Rock, something that happens in the cloud. So if you tell them what are the things that are important to you that would help decide who you vote for, fuel subsidy not there. Because they don't understand. And many of these leaders don't understand. But you, I'm sure you understand now from the little explanation I have given. Abi, you don't understand. The problem in Nigeria's oil and gas is not the subsidy. You don't need to bring back subsidy or remove subsidy. You can't bring back what was not removed in the first place. It was all corruption. The only thing that needs to be done is take away the corruption, which is what Peter Obi said he would do. Take away the corruption in Nigeria's oil and gas. 210 trillion. They see the final 210 trillion. The other time they said, and it was the IMF that came to say it, that the federal government spends 8 trillion naira off books. Many people don't know. If you do 272 barrels per day by 365, it comes to about 8 million barrels. By almost 100, it comes to about $8 billion. That is the money that the IMF was talking about. And you see, the NNPC is a black box. Even NNPC don't know what they happen in there. The only person that can know is the president. And that's a president that knows how to look. If it's a president that does not know how to look, They will give him the run around. They go just dey deceive him. They go just dey turn him, go right, go left. They go dey confuse him. But I am confident that nobody can confuse Tinubu. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows the corruption that is in there. And that is why somehow his hand is in defending Mele Kyari from being prosecuted so that the corruption in the NNPC will not be exposed. So this is why who we need is not Atiku. It's not Tinubu. It is somebody that can take away the corruption. And that person can only be Peter Obi. So don't just mock, don't just laugh. Don't just criticize. Get your PVC. Starting with your polling unit. Get acquainted with Vote Watch now. So that we take back our country. Starting with the NNPC. We don't need to bring back fuel subsidy, because doing that will simply mean bringing back the corruption. What we just need to do is take out the corruption in the NNPC and reduce the price of petrol.